Martin, thank you. Labour's plan for a mansion tax on properties worth more than £2 million have been defeated in the Commons this afternoon. The Liberal Democrats refused to support the measure they championed at the last election, accusing Labour of being infantile and divisive. According to the Centre for Policy Studies, around 75,000 properties in the UK are currently worth more than £2 million.
People who own properties that are worth over £2 million, I'm sure can afford the extra charge to help the poor. And if they can't, the answer? Move to a smaller property and you won't lose out at all. Today, Mr Speaker, I'm suggesting that those with homes valued at £2 million or more and who can't afford a mansion tax should do what the poor have to do and downsize.
Well, the latest snapshot from the housing market suggests signs of renewed activity. Housing sales are at their highest level for 2.5 years, according to the Royal Institute for Chartered Surveyors. An average of 17 properties were sold per surveyor in the 3 months ending in February, although that's still less than half of the sort of activity we saw at the height of the property boom. Prices remain broadly flat, but the number of mortgages on the market has increased significantly since the launch of the government's Funding for Lending scheme.
I think we have to remember that there's no such thing as a single UK property market, and our figures actually show that whilst it has gone up on average, some parts are better than others. I have to say, as far as sales were concerned, every area of the country, including Scotland, was showing signs of picking up, including places that perhaps have been down a bit in the past, East Midlands, the North West and that sort of thing. I'm afraid there's only one area that still seems to be lagging a bit behind, and that's East Anglia at the moment.
OK, here with me at the Gherkin, not in East Anglia, Jonathan Davis, a financial advisor who thinks you'd be mad to buy a house more or less anywhere in the UK, and Tracy Kellett, who specialises in finding property for clients in London and in the South East. Tracy, let's talk to you first about this, the idea of a mansion tax. It ain't going to happen, I mean, certainly for now, at least, but presumably this is one that's going to impact on your clients. You were saying earlier that 3/4 of the deals that you arrange are on properties for more than £2 million. What effect would something like that have had on the housing market, do you think?
We've already seen a little bit of an effect last year with the increase of stamp duty at the £2 million threshold, and it's had a relatively devastating effect on the price range between 2 and 3 million, which is predominantly London. So that would almost certainly be reiterated if they went into a mansion tax type.
And give us some sense of what this tells us broadly about what's happening here. I mean, because as we've seen today, I mean, the economic recovery as well is non-existent. In fact, it's threatening to lurch back into recession. We're seeing problems about banks and lending, and yet are you seeing that reflected in the number of people coming to you and asking you to look for places to buy? Is there a nervousness there or confidence returning?
There's been a real nervousness and a real fickleness among buyers over the past couple of years. I've seen a very, very marked increase in the past month or two from buyers. They're coming back, and that includes Brits. Very much so. That's
interesting. That's very interesting. Jonathan Davis, because, not least because actually the indicators that we look at, if we're looking at Halifax and the nationwide RICS and so on and so forth, they all seem to point in the same direction, modestly, but that house prices are slowly, on the national level, the average level, are edging back to where they were before the financial crisis.
Perhaps they've risen 1 or 2%, but across the country they're down, 10–20%. In some regions of the country, this is a national show after all, they're down 50%. Obviously there's been a skewing because of the likes of her clients, but the housing market is still in a state of collapse. You kind of
not in London and the South East. That's just not the case.
2 points. You kind of brushed over that. The chartered surveyors are saying that they're selling 1 a week, whereas previously they were selling 2 a week. Excuse me, that's a 50% fall. And secondly, in London, it's very interesting. We're seeing anecdotal signs that there's actually now, for example, an oversupply of rental properties. In other words, the buy-to-let sector has got ahead of itself. Now, when you add in what's going to come from the housing benefit, the universal benefits that's coming in later this year, which is going to restrict how much landlords can receive for social housing, I tell you, there's going to be a lot of properties coming in the market into next year.
Tracy Kellett, there are reasons to be very cautious, aren't there, about what the road ahead? It could be very, very bumpy.
The biggest reason to be cautious are interest rates. That is a bit of a ticking time bomb, but working on the premise that that's going to be handled cautiously and carefully. The fact is that people have been sitting out the market for the last few years and they're coming back now. They want to buy. Renting is extortionately expensive. The entire long-term rental market is flawed. They want to be in their own homes.
They want to buy, and they can buy, can't they, Jonathan? Because what we're seeing is the funding for lending scheme is that mortgage rates are coming down. Credit is becoming available again.
Do you know, the funding for lending scheme, it's devastating. What it really meant was that borrowers would get lower interest rates, but savers would get lower deposit rates. Yet again, the prudent is bailing out the imprudent. That to me is a travesty.
I don't think it's imprudent to want to own your own home, particularly in the UK, where renting is not a very pleasant experience, and it's expensive.
Well, that's perhaps your opinion. Renting can be a brilliant experience. If the boiler goes, you don't have to pay for it. For example,
you're paying for it.
Do you know, I was looking. I was talking to a client recently, and he's looking, in fact, to rent in the Pimlico area, which for those outside London, it's a really nice area, part of London. And then reams and reams of flats reduced 15 to 20% since the original asking price. This is for rentals. So no, house prices are in most of the country flat or falling. In London, they've been rising. The important thing is the market has collapsed. Even in London, the £1 million plus property. Let me finish this point. There's 2 years of stock.
2 years of stock. OK, but I mean, Tracy Kellett, you're reporting an increase in demand. What in terms of the impact of funding for lending on obtaining a mortgage? I mean, is it becoming easier? Are you seeing?
Yes, it's evident. It's really quite astonishing to me, because I didn't think it would have a dent at all. But within the last month or two, the mortgage brokers I talk to, and I talk to a lot, they have never been busier, not for years. They're cock-a-hoop. OK,
Tracy Kellett, Jonathan Davis, two very different views on the road ahead. We shall watch this with interest. Thank you both for sharing your views with us there.